Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today, as you can see based off of last week's episode, we are going to do the 1-year update on my Red Sea S-1000. To kind of commemorate the day, as you can see my camera's changed a little bit. I don't know if you can see if it's a little clear or not, but I actually ended up getting a new phone. At some point I'd probably like to get a camera, but I think, for now a phone is fine. Now, I didn't get it just for this. What actually happened, this is my old phone. It'll be a little hard to see right there, but I actually smashed the crap out of it, so the screen no longer turns on. But, hey, we can say it's just kind of an act of God, and, now we have a brand new phone to take videos with, so hopefully it comes out a little bit clearer, a little bit more crisp. I'm still playing with the color settings, so it may not be super colorful as you can see right now, but that's okay. The orange lens that I generally used on my old phone doesn't really work on this one because at some point it changes camera lenses from one to the other. So yeah, that's not going to work, so I'll have to buy a new one. But for now, we're just using it based off of the camera's internal settings. It'll do just fine. Looks pretty decent, and let's go ahead and get started on the 1-year update. So first things first, we'll go ahead and start with the equipment. For those of you who have not followed in the prior episodes, this tank is running the Orpheks icons. I have 3 units right here, so 1, 2, and 3. Overall, they have done a very good job growing out this tank. It has been super silent. The app has been super good. I'm actually quite impressed with them. They have been able to grow pretty much any coral that I want, with the exception of maybe some mushrooms. The little mushrooms I have in this tank, most of them have been moved to the downstairs sump, but for some reason those little guys just haven't been doing well in the display, but they do perfectly fine under the sump. But these guys definitely do have enough power to grow SPS, as you can see my kind of little growing garden right here. Now, it's only been a year, but the aluminum extrusion that we used to make this guy has held up pretty strong. If anything, I'll probably end up adding a couple more lights to this, because as the corals grow, I'm starting to notice more and more shading as we get by. So one good example is like this little stylo right here is starting to shade the purple bonsai. We have some shading down here because this millie right here is plating out and growing super big. So as the tank gets, more grown in, I'll probably just have to add more lights, just because I'll need more coverage, all over the tank, instead of just like a single point light right in the middle of the tank. So that'll be in a future episode. I'm still not quite sure exactly which lights we'll go ahead and put on there. Either way, I know they'll be awesome and they'll add a lot of color and a lot of pop to the tank. So once we get to that point, great, but that'll be, like I said, later on in the future, just because, inflation's ridiculous right now. So, unless somebody wants to sponsor me with some lights, like I said, it'll be in a future episode. Now, what is probably going to be the most important part of this tank is going to be the display itself. So like I mentioned, this is a Red Sea S-1000, which is a 200-gallon Red Sea. It is 200 in the top and then another 65 in the sump below. And most people are probably going to be interested in this just because, Red Seas in the last year or two have been ridiculed online for, having a lot of failures. People say, oh, I would never own a Red Sea just because, it'll explode in a couple years. And with all of that, all of those issues, they ended up making the G2 series, which is what this tank is. And the biggest difference that I've seen with this is going to be the armored corners, which you can see right here. So what it is, it's a little hard to see, but it is basically a triangular piece of acrylic that is put into each of the 4 corners right here. And what that does is it prevents you from having the scraper, the magnet scraper, hit the corners right here and break up the little bits of silicone here on the side that end up, kind of rupturing a tank. So having those little corner pieces added, to me, has done quite a wonder. I do scrape my glass quite regularly, and every time I do hit it with the magnet, it just kind of goes over that bracing, so it doesn't actually hit the silicone. So in the long run, hopefully it holds up super well. Obviously, there's no guarantees in life, but that is probably my most favorite part of the actual display tank, with the second being the black Euro bracing that you see right here. As you can see, I have the stickers still on there because they're in a couple different languages. It looks super cool, kind of like a retro sticker, so I haven't wanted to take them off, but I do think it's super nice just to have it on there because it looks kind of cool. And then also, because it is black, it is nice and sleek, and it goes along with my Red Sea kit that has the black frame, and then also, you can't tell like this because there's a little bit of a glare, but this is black mesh as well. So the overall look is very clean and very elegant. Now for the wave makers on the tank, what we are running is going to be these Red Sea Reef Wave 45s. So I am basically running most of the Red Sea platform on this tank. Currently, this is how I have it set up. We have 2 reef waves here on the right side of the tank, and currently I do have 1 more on the left side of the tank. I will probably end up adding the second one here just to create, a full 4, just to make it even, and be able to provide enough flow for all the SPS once they grow out. But currently they are doing just fine. Now, I ended up putting these Red Sea Reef Waves here on the Euro bracing because number one, they're kind of more out of the way. They'll make it a little easier just to grab and clean as well. And because putting it up here, I've noticed it doesn't obstruct the view as much. I generally view most of my tank from the front and not the sides, just because the sides of these are, it's not that big, so I don't view it all that often. But being able to put the reef waves right here saves a lot of space. I used to have them here in the back, for example, behind the rocks on these overflow areas, but as the corals grow out, it kind of impeded the flow, and also pulling them from the back is super difficult. But at least this way, they're out of the way. They're not, for example, in the middle of the tank right here, pushing water over, so they're not too unsightly, and it keeps it kind of just a little bit more minimal look, which I'm perfectly okay with. Of course, it'd be really cool if these magnets were a little bit slimmer, just so, it'd be a little easier to hide. But, they do their job, and since I don't have any little kids or anything here running around, at least not yet, I don't have to worry about somebody accidentally, for example, pulling these off and the whole thing just kind of crashing down. And as you can see, they provide a good amount of flow. You have my gold torch down here blowing, the Holy Grail, my Bernard Pora. There is just plenty of flow to kind of go around, with the exception of this left side where currently I only have the 1 reef wave, and that's pointed mostly at my SPS. So later on, I will definitely go ahead and get that 4th one. It's just a matter of time, and I'll get to it basically just whenever I get to it. Now, next up, we'll go ahead and move to the sump area right here. First off, let's go ahead and move to the right side, which is where we have our ATO. That is currently the Innovative Marine, which I think holds about 15 gallons or so of water, but it does a perfect job and it lasts me generally about a week, just depending on evaporation. Now, as the winter sets in, the evaporation is going to come up a bit more, which I am expecting, so I'll have to fill it more often, but in the meantime, it works perfectly fine. Now, in my sump currently, a couple things have changed around. Number one, you can see I removed the filter sock area just because I honestly wasn't changing my filter socks all that often, maybe just once a month. So basically when the filter socks got dirty and they kind of clumped up and started overflowing, I would just leave it there. I wouldn't actually change them. So I kind of figured that'd be more detrimental than beneficial. So I went ahead and took them out. Currently in its place, I do have just the bag of carbon floating, and then also just this big rock that I had just sitting here. I'll probably put it somewhere else at some point, but I just didn't really have anywhere else to put it, and it has a lot of beneficial life, for example those mushrooms and bacteria and whatnot, so I didn't want to just leave it out and have it dry out. I am considering a reef mat at some point, but we just haven't gotten to that point yet. But we'll see, like I said, with the lights also in a future episode. Now, most of the frags are still here. I haven't really done much with them. We've just basically, slowly let them grow out and just kind of do their own thing. What's really nice is going to be the little shop of horrors you see back there. If you can kind of see back there. That one probably has the most growth. That's also the one that I've recorded the most, so I know we started basically that little guy with 2 or 3 polyps, and now it's a good 20 or so, which is amazing. So it's actually, for some reason, even though it's a slow grower, it's grown a lot faster than a lot of my other zoas that you can see here. They've only popped up like 1 or 2 extra zoas. This one I can understand why it's slow, because I let it get full of aptasia, so it's probably getting stung a little bit. But for the most part, the growth in the sump has been pretty decent. It's a little hard to see right now, but we do also, for example, have the mushrooms right here, kind of just doing their thing, looking super fine. One of the jawbreakers did happen to fall out of the rock in the display, so I moved it here to the sump to maybe hope and see if it'll grow down here. And then we have an OG bounce that we got. That one we had gotten as a loose frag, so it wasn't attached to a rock, but it still hasn't. It's just kind of sat there. So I may sell that guy at some point and just try to buy one that is attached, just to make it easier. And then on the back here, we just have some miscellaneous zoas. Nothing all particularly interesting, but just, zoas in colors that I ended up liking, so I went ahead and bought them, and they've grown out pretty good. Now, the rest of the back rack, this little red bit right here, is going to be all, I think it's dragon's breath, or some other type of macroalgae. It's grown really nice. It's almost like a little forest. So we're going to keep letting it grow back there. Every once in a while, I will pull some out and then just put it into the main display and just let the tangs kind of just gorge on it, which they absolutely love. And then lastly but not least, we have the Colorado Sunburst, which has just been chilling here, doing its own thing and just looking absolutely beautiful. Now, I don't know yet if I'll put it in the main display. We may, like I say, at some point, but I'm just not sure because I don't really want it to be running around. But we'll figure that out later. Now, the setup of the sump itself is still currently the same, so water comes in through here, goes in through this hole into the other sump on the other side, and then back out this way to the return. I am currently running these little marine pure balls here. It's kind of on its own little stand so it doesn't fall out. And yeah, it's just a good, out of the way place just to put these marine pure balls without, having any problems or worrying about space issues. And then currently we are running this on the Reef LED 90, which is the same ones I had when I had the 525 tank, as well as the E260. So this guy's getting pretty darn old, but it's still working like a champ. As you can see, it's still growing coral, it's still growing anemones, so it's doing just fine with what it's doing. And then overall, everything else in the main sump right here is perfectly the same. I haven't changed any of the tubing or anything, or added any kind of sterilizers, just because it wasn't necessary. The little lights right here have been doing super fantastic. It's all the way around, and they light up pretty good with this little motion sensor we have here. For this one, I can go ahead and put a link to where I found them. Basically, it's a lot nicer just because once you open the door and it senses your motion, it just lights right up. I don't need to do like a switch of any kind or wire a switch of any kind. You know, if it knows I'm working in here, it just turns on. Now, in the small frag tank side, so this used to be the frag tank that we had used you know, previously to hold coral, but obviously we moved it to the main sump, and then now this is basically just like an equipment area, which I do think is a lot better. So currently we have just the skimmer running right here in the front. It is a little bit big, but it luckily does fit. The water comes in through here, is forced through this grate right here. This grate does come with the Red Sea, so you know, you just slide it right in and it kind of directs the flow, and then it just goes to the Vast Marine calc reactor, which drips into this little overflow area that we have. This little overflow is something that I printed, 3D printed, and it does a really good job churning up the calc washer into the water, so it pretty much guarantees like 100% dispersion, which is just absolutely fantastic. And then also for my additional supplements, I have them dosed into the same overflow, just to make sure, you know, it's churned in and just fully utilized. These wires are run over around the back of the tank and come right here. So currently I am just dosing additional bottles of the trace elements, and I have finally reached a point where alkalinity is not enough anymore. So the SPS growth in my tank has been so heavy to a point where pH is very high, but alkalinity has dropped because there's just such high consumption. So I have started to dose the Red Sea alkalinity now, as well as a little bit of the calcium, just to keep up with that demand. I might end up switching to a calcium reactor at some point because it's a lot more set it and forget it. But for now, the Red Sea alkalinity and calcium will do just fine, just because my consumption isn't too high. And it's super convenient just to go to a store and just buy it. You know, the dosing is already set with the Red Sea Reef dose, and it just kind of, you know, it just does its thing. But my overall equipment setup is basically very simple. I don't do any kind of UV sterilizers. I don't do like an algae scrubber of any kind. It's very basic, just a skimmer and the dosing at this point. Nothing else, you know, added on. Like I said, we might do a reef mat at some point, but that'll be later on in the future. But I do kind of believe that reefing can be very simple. I've done this since I was in high school, and you know, even in high school, reefing was pretty basic. There wasn't all these gadgets like we used to have. I mean, like we do now. So, you know, doing it kind of the old school way where you can just keep it really simple, you know, really does work out. And as you can see, you know, as long as you have a little patience, it kind of does pay off. And last but not least, the whole enchilada, what you guys have been waiting for, is the livestock in the tank. So in the past year, we've definitely had our up and downs. In the first few months, we definitely had like dinoflagellates, because I did basically start this entire tank with dry rock. In all my previous tanks, I had some sort of live rock. So it was already cultured, but for this one, everything was bare white, except for this reef rock right here from Caribsea, because it was painted purple. But everything else was dry. None of it was, from live rock. It was all cut. Most of it, I think, was Marco rock. And we basically just started with some bottled bacteria, which at this point, honestly, I think I'll never do again. I do honestly believe the reason I had dinos for the first month or two in this tank is due to the fact that we use bottled bacteria. So there wasn't a very live aspect in this tank, or there wasn't a lot of, biological bacteria variations in this tank that, would make it a successful reef tank. So if I was to do it again, I'd probably get some live rock, make it a lot easier on myself, and maybe, be able to completely negate that entire dino situation that took away from probably what was a couple months of growth. Now, obviously for this tank, though it is a mixed reef, most of my coral were going to be SPF, so just a little bit more on the SPS heavy type of side, which, as you can see, my SPS have done amazingly well. They've grown quite a lot in the last year. Some of these I've only had for like a few months. For example, this Walt Disney right here, which has encrusted and grown out a couple, extra little branches here. Some of them have just been, absolutely exponential. Now, I'm kind of at the point now where I'm going to have to start trimming because, for example, some of these corals are getting very close to touching. I have, for example, this Garf Bonsai, which, nobody tells you that Garf Bonsais kind of like to base out a lot before they grow upwards. So as you can see here, it covers a lot of surface area to the point where it just recently killed one of my sticks. Luckily, the stick has also branched out and popped out new sticks, but it is really annoying to lose like the main frag that I had gotten. And at some point, same thing's gonna happen with the stylo here up on top. It's getting pretty close to touching that Garf Bonsai, so I'll have to go ahead and cut it. Same thing right here. You can see this little branch right here on the left is almost touching the coral on the right, so we'll have to cut that too. So basically in the next, couple months, that's gonna be something I'm gonna have to worry about. A lot of these corals growing out, starting to touch other corals, they're gonna have, the fight of their lives, and we're gonna have to start trimming and kind of, arranging it so that they just don't outright murder each other. But for the most part, these sticks have done super well. You've already seen this side right here. We have a couple, over here as well that have done really nice. We have a rainbow loom right here, a PC rainbow right behind it, which is nice and red, a red Ferrari behind that. We have this right here, which is kind of a variation on a orange passion, and it's done really good at just being nice and kind of branched out. And we just have, a bunch of other different kind of acros that provide a lot of different, interest and texture and dimension to the tank itself. Now, moving down the list, we get to the LPS. For the most part, they've done pretty okay. I have noticed recently some of my coral have decided to have a little bit of tissue recession. I'm not exactly sure why. But I have been just trying to do like a weekly water change just to see if I can correct any issues. Now, they don't really affect any of the frog spawns, but they have, for example, affected this elegance, which I've lost half of it, but the other half is doing okay. I do have a little tissue recession from this gold torch, as well as, for example, this Sinorina I have in the shade right here. Seem to have gotten a little injured as well, and I'm really not sure why. Now, they do still look pretty good, so, I want to try to bother them as minimally as possible. I feel like maybe I shouldn't stick my hand into the tank too much and worry more about the water quality in the tank so that they can maybe just go ahead and heal on their own. Now, other coral, for example, this Goniopora right here, have done super well. We have some frogs and hammers and octospawns in the back right here, as well as this Kojiwada, which has done wonderful. I do think I'm at a point now where I might cut a frag or two off and plant them next to it to kind of get a garden going, because it's just this one tree that I keep having, which, I mean, it looks cool, but it'd be nice to have like a forest, you know? Nobody really wants just one tree. And then as we move along, we have this hammer here. This used to be the hammer that was right in the center tank. But as you can see, it's burned through this acro right here. I don't know what exactly it's called, but it kind of murdered the tip of the coral because of its growth. So we went ahead and just put him right here for now, which he's doing perfectly fine. We have a leather right here, which is going to be like a weeping willow type of leather. Every month I have this, it gets just a little bit longer on the tentacles. So I'm hoping at some point it gets, you know, some crazy long tentacles that will make it wave around super good. It waves around a lot right now, but, you know, it could definitely be better. Now, another leather that we have on our list is the yellow Fiji. That is the one that I had gotten recently. It's probably about doubled in size, though it's not that yellow right now, just because I haven't blasted it with a lot of light. Like, it's gotten a little bit, but it hasn't gotten a lot. So we're just going to let that guy be for now. It's, you know, increased in size, so I'm happy. But we definitely don't need to force it for any reason. Kind of the, you know, OG of my tank is my Space Invader Pectinia. We've gone ahead and moved him to the back right here because I was running out of space again on the side, because he's, as you can see, he's gigantic. There's really no space for him anywhere in this tank. But yeah, putting him here, he grows at a slow enough rate where I'll be able to keep him here for quite a while, because he still has a good amount of room on each side just to grow out. But yeah, he looks super nice right there, so we'll just go ahead and keep him right there. And then we move on to our last little island area. Here we have a couple of trachees. The one in the back right there has suffered a little bit of a cut, so it's receding a little bit. It's slowed down a lot, so I'm hoping that it just kind of recovers on its own without me having to interfere and weakening it. We do have the lot of torches from the torch episode, so this little torch island. These have done super well. As you can see, they're nice and flowy, and I do think at some point, if I add that fourth reef wave, this will be so beautiful, just flowing around. They'll probably get even longer and just, you know, look absolutely perfect. And as for the rest of the corals, just some miscellaneous ones. We have the bubble that I've had here now for quite a while, since the beginning of the tank. He's done super well and gotten super big, so I put him on the sand bed just to get his own little space. And then recently, the candy cane fell off its rock and kind of broke a bunch of pieces, so I have them just sitting right here for now. Not sure what I'll do with those, but, you know, we'll just let them chill. It's not really a big deal. And lastly, we have the Zoa rock, which I'll say currently looks okay. I've been thinking about just getting rid of the whole rock. I kind of don't like Zoas in my display tank, even though they're on their own island. I'm not really sure why, but... and I don't know, that's just the way I am. But for the most part, it looks just fine. I'll probably put a couple more Zoas on there to see if I can get them to grow out. There is a bunch of Aptasia on it, which I'll probably have to deal with in future episodes. But for now, it looks, you know, just fine the way it is. And then lastly for this episode is just going to be the fish. I haven't added any new ones. I've mentioned this in prior episodes before. I do kind of have a fish issue where they're set in their ways, and, you know, when I put a new one in, they get harassed to death. And it's mostly from two main characters. One is this purple tang right here, and the other one is this fairy wrasse right there. So, though I would like to add more tank, and people have mentioned I don't have a lot of fish in this tank, until I catch and get rid of those two fish, I probably won't buy any more new fish. So, though it does look kind of empty, I don't really have another choice. I may end up removing them at some point if I get the nerve to catch them, but at this point, you know, I'm actually kind of okay with getting rid of the fairy wrasse because he's such a jerk. But it's to the point where this purple wrasse is kind of almost like family, so it kind of hurt a little bit if I got rid of it. But same thing, I'll see later on if that's something I'll actually end up doing. Chances are I might just end up moving him to the sump, and I'll let him just stay there for a couple months and, let other fish kind of acclimate to the tank, and then I'll put him back up here. But in the meantime, everything is done super well. The tank is growing out as expected, and though it's not perfect, it is kind of getting there. It's, as always, with anybody else's reef tank, a work in progress. And in this next year, we'll definitely see it get better and grow into the dream reef tank that I think it'll be. But thanks, guys, as always, for watching. If you have any questions, post them down in the comments. I'll go ahead and answer this one. I know a lot of times I don't answer a lot of the comments, but since it's the 1 year update, I'll answer them in the comment section down below. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Like if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.